Hello everyone, EtherSong here, and I'm back with another Blue Protocol video. In this video, I'll be looking at the 5 classes currently announced for Blue Protocol, and their playstyles based on what we know from the closed beta test, the new official website, and the developer livestream. I will give the names and descriptions of skills based on information from the closed beta test or newest developer livestream when possible. Also, as a disclaimer, since the closed beta test, skills may have undergone changes or have been removed. I will note what skills we know have changed. In addition, new skills have also been added to the game. We should know the full extent of the changes when the network test begins. One thing to note for people new to Blue Protocol is that all classes can be played on the same character. There's no need to create an alt. You aren't locked into your class choice, and you can always change your class later. Before I introduce the classes, I would like to first give a short overview of the skill system in the game. This is important for understanding how classes play. First up, let's talk about tactical skills. These are your main class skills, and each class can equip up to 4 tactical skills at a time. What tactical skills you choose is up to you. For example, depending on what skills you equipped, your build could be more supportive or more offensive. You could focus on single target damage or area of effect skills. Trying out different builds looks to be an exciting part of the game. Apart from tactical skills, you also have an ultimate skill. This is a powerful skill that can be used to turn the tides of the battle. In addition, you have 2 regular skills. One is your basic attack, and another one is often related to a unique class mechanic. There are also battle imagines that can be equipped to call forth the skill of a monster and are shared among classes. So altogether you have 4 tactical skills, 1 ultimate skill, 2 battle imagines, and 2 regular skills. Apart from skills, there are also passive abilities that can be set to add more diversity to builds. Now let's look at the classes. The first class I will be discussing is the Aegis Fighter. This close-range class uses a sword and shield and acts as a cornerstone to a party's defense. They use skills to stop enemies from advancing and give their party the advantage in battle. This class's unique mechanic is the shield gauge. They use it to protect themselves from enemy attacks. If the gauge reaches 0, the Aegis Fighter gets the guard break status and is unable to guard or use certain skills. First, let's look at the Aegis Fighter skills from the closed beta test. Let's begin with the Aegis Fighter's 2 regular skills. Break Slash is the Aegis Fighter's main attack. There are variations of this attack based on directional input. The next regular skill is Shield Guard Counterattack. You can guard against enemies by using your shield gauge. In the closed beta, by holding a normal attack while guarding, you could prepare to initiate a counterattack. However, this version of counterattack has undergone some changes. In a recent developer stream, we learned that it is no longer a counterattack stance, but is now a guard counter action that can be performed after guarding. Continuing on, let's look at some tactical skills. The first skill is Shield Charge, an attack where you charge forward with your shield and stun enemies. Higher levels of the skill allow for follow-up attacks. The next skill is Blow Beat. You send out a shockwave damaging and taunting enemies in the area. Next is the Fortress skill. You get a buff allowing you to guard attacks without consuming your shield gauge. Continuing on, here is the Sunrise Charge skill. You charge forward with your shield, causing a light explosion on hit. Additional levels allow for follow-up attacks and larger light explosions. Here is the Regeneration skill. This grants you healing over a set amount of time. The next skill is Celestial Pillar. It creates a pillar of light around you that continuously damages enemies. Next up is Crescent Light, a skill where you perform a light-empowered slash. And finally, we have a look at Aegis Fighter's old ultimate skill, Judgment Shield. However, we have seen this change to a more defensive ultimate in the recent developer livestream. Now let's take a look at the updated class video from the new official website. The first skill used here looks new. You can see how it produces a shield of light to protect oneself and party from attacks. Here we have Shield Charge. The next skill is Fortress. And here's the Blow Beat skill. In the closed beta, it also taunted enemies, but taunts may act differently now with the newly introduced hate or aggro system. The developers have stated that with this new hate system, many of Aegis Fighter's skills generate high hate, so Blowbeat may utilize this. Finally, we can see Aegis Fighter's guard skill and new guard counterattack. After guarding an attack, the Aegis Fighter is now able to follow it up with a guard counter. This replaces the counterattack stance mechanic as seen in the closed beta test. Next, let's take a look at the gameplay and information we learned from the developer livestream. As we can see here, the Aegis Fighter is a tank and uses the shield to defend and counter attacks. We can also see how the Aegis Fighter's counterattack has been changed since the closed beta test. It is now closer to a guard counter, being able to counter even after being knocked back when guarding. We also get a look at the new enemy step jump system. This allows characters to jump in the air towards an enemy and then jump off that enemy for a double jump. From there, you're able to follow it up with an air attack, also called an assault attack. Assault attacks performed by jumping off enemies also get enhanced depending on the class. For the Aegis Fighter, it is able to bind enemies with this attack. Compared to the closed beta, the biggest change for the Aegis Fighter is the addition of the hate or aggro system to the game. As such, Aegis Fighter skills on average generate high amounts of aggro. Another big change is that the Aegis Fighter now has a new ultimate. In the closed beta test, the ultimate skill was an attack, but now the Aegis Fighter has a buff that they apply to themselves. The buff grants increased defense, super armor, and regeneration. In addition, casting the skill heals the Aegis Fighter and refills their shield gauge. Furthermore, while this ultimate is active, the Aegis Fighter gains another class gauge. This gauge's level rises by attacking, and after reaching a certain point, it can be reactivated to grant allies regeneration and defense up. Through this, the Aegis Fighter is able to protect their allies as well. This adds a new level of strategy as to when best to use their ultimate. The next class is the Twin Striker. This close-range class uses two axes to unleash a furious onslaught. Through a flurry of attacks, their power is able to exceed its limits. The Twin Striker's unique mechanic is the combo gauge. This gauge fills up as the Twin Striker attacks enemies. It increases Twin Striker's damage up to 130% and is used to fuel some skills. Let's first look at Twin Striker's skills from the closed beta test. Let's start with the regular attacks. Beast Swing is Twin Striker's basic attack. There are variations of this attack based on directional input. The next regular skill is Axe Tornado. You step forward to do a spinning slash. Damage is reduced while using the skill. Now let's continue on to Twin Striker's tactical skills. First skill is Brutal Blow. Perform a wide area slash in front of you. The skill can be charged to increase its power. Here is Falling Impact. You leap forward, letting out a damaging shockwave on impact. Next is War Cry. You let out a War Cry, giving you super armor for a set amount of time. Next is Crimson Blow. Perform a spinning fire attack. Higher skill levels allow it to be charged, increasing its power and elemental strength. Here's Lava Impact. Perform a leaping fire attack, leaving a carpet of flames on impact that cause continuous fire damage. Higher level of the skills allow it to be used up to 3 times. Next is Blood Axe. This allows you to drain life from enemies you damage. And this is Burning Rush. You perform fire-imbued attacks in front of you. Higher skill levels increase the number of attacks. Finally, we have the Twin Striker's ultimate skill, Vortex Impact. You knock the enemy in front of you in the air and then do an area attack on the ground. Now let's look at the class video from the new website. The first skill looks similar to Burning Rush from the closed beta. Perhaps the skill was changed to no longer be a fire attack, or perhaps this is a new skill. The next skill looks like Axe Tornado. Here's Fall Impact. Next is Brutal Blow. And finally, we have the War Cry skill. Continuing on, let's look at the information we learned from the developer livestream. The developers start by saying one of the basic ways of playing the Twin Striker is dodging enemy attacks and coming back in to strike. We also learned one of the biggest changes to the Twin Striker since the closed beta is how the combo gauge works. In the closed beta, after taking damage, the combo gauge would reset back to 0. This is in spite of the Twin Striker having drain attacks it could use to heal back up from a hit. This caused the Twin Striker to feel a little incohesive. As such, taking damage no longer resets the combo gauge. Once the battle ends, after a short amount of time, it will reset to 0. There are now skills which also use the combo gauge as a resource. For example, this Twin Striker is using a buff that consumes part of the combo gauge to increase the power of their tactical skills. As for other changes, the Twin Striker's right click or secondary regular skill now has super armor and drain. In addition, its assault attack also drains. As such, it is possible to play like something of a berserker by taking enemy attacks head on and draining the heal back up. We are also introduced to the new party chain system. This is the party chain that appears on the top left of the screen. It is a combo shared among the party. By raising the party's combo number, the party can gain increased attack as well as buffs after a certain number of combos. The next class is Blast Archer. This is a mid to long range class, proficient at party combat. They are a class that excels at party support. Depending on the combat situation, they can use a variety of skills, such as area of effect attacks, heals, or status conditions to turn the tides of battle in their favor. In a recent live stream, we saw the Blast Archer's new unique gauge. It fills up from damaging enemies and can be consumed to heal one's party. First, let's look at the Blast Archer skills from the closed beta test. Once again, let's start by looking at the regular skills first. Arrow Rush is Blast Archer's main attack. This attack has variations based on when the attack button is held during the attack chain. Here's the Slalom Shot regular skill. You shoot a powerful arrow and are able to dodge in a direction. However, this was shown to be replaced by a healing skill in the recent developer stream. Continuing on, let's look at Blast Archer's tactical skills. Starting out, we have the Strike Arrow skill. You let loose a powerful arrow. You can also charge the shot to increase its damage. Hitting an enemy's weak point will further increase its damage. Next is Lethal Shower. You rain arrows down on enemies in a set area. Charging the skill increases its area and power. And this is Healing Arrow. You create a healing rain in a set area. Charging the skill increases its area and healing amount. The next skill is Hypno Blast. You shoot an arrow that puts an enemy to sleep. Here is Negative Resonance. You shoot an arrow that spreads its conditions to nearby enemies. Next up is Hunter Spirit. You are more difficult to be targeted by enemies. In addition, you decrease the time it takes to charge your skills and reduce the cooldowns for all party members. And this is Dust Force. You create a dust storm at an area that does earth damage over time and increases the effects of negative conditions. Its power can be increased by charging it. Finally, we have Blast Archer's ultimate skill, Mortal Gravity. This skill pulls in and damages enemies for a set amount of time. Now let's look at the new Blast Archer video from the official website. This first skill is Strike Arrow. Next, we can see the Lethal Shower skill, raining down arrows on the enemy. It is followed by Healing Arrow skill, creating a healing area. And finally, we have Hypno Blast, putting the enemy to sleep. Continuing on, let's look at what the developers had to say about the Blast Archer in the developer livestream. Jumping into this video, we can see that there are multiple enemies present. This is to show off Blast Archer's ultimate skill. You can group enemies up with the ultimate skill and then lay down AoE to take them out. Another thing the developers shared is that if you look closely, some of Blast Archer's damage numbers are blue. This shows that the Blast Archer is hitting an enemy's weak point. Weak points vary from enemy to enemy, but the head is very common. By aiming for the enemy's weak point, you can increase your damage. Another thing we saw here is that it is now possible to recover after taking a hit from an enemy. One of Blast Archer's common playstyles is putting an enemy to sleep, applying buffs to oneself, and then hitting them with a powerful attack. In Blue Protocol, the Blast Archer also acts as a healer. As such, the Blast Archer's class action has undergone a change since the closed beta test. You now have a gauge that increases as you damage enemies. Hitting the enemy's weak points increases the gauge even further, and by right-clicking and using the class action, the Blast Archer is able to heal depending on how much the gauge was filled. Healing Arrow also still exists, but depending on the party composition, other classes drain skills and the party chain may provide enough healing on their own. As such, playing without Healing Arrow is now a possibility. Another thing noted by the developers is that the Blast Archer can both lock on or free aim its shots. For enemies like these foxes, the enemy head is low, so not much aiming is needed. But for other enemies, manually aiming to hit their weak points could provide a big boost to damage. Continuing on, here is the Spellcaster. It is a high difficulty, long range class and is most powerful when allies hold the front line. It fights from a distance and eliminates enemies with a number of high damage elemental attacks for as long as their EP remains. The Spellcaster's class mechanic is the EP gauge. It is a resource used to cast spells. The Spellcaster must stop to refill it to continue casting spells. First, let's look at the Spellcaster's skills from the closed beta test. Let's start by looking at the regular skills. The Spellcaster's basic attack is called Trinity Shot. It has variations based on directional input. Its other regular skill is called Engram Charge, and it is how the class recharges EP after using spells. Now let's take a look at Spellcaster's tactical skills. The first skill here is called Fire Blast. You shoot out a fireball. It can be charged to increase its size and damage. Next is Blizzard. You call forth a blizzard at target location. Charging increases the area and duration of the spell. This is Lightning. You shoot out multiple lightning bolts to pierce enemies. Since the closed beta, this skill appears to have undergone some adjustments, allowing more lightning bolts to be shot without charging. Here we have Thunder Mines. You send out balls of lightning that track foes and explode, damaging the area. Charging increases the number of mines. Next is Flame Grenade. You shoot out a flame grenade that explodes, damaging the area. Continuing on, here is Frigid Crush. You call forth large blocks of ice to fall on foes at target location. You can increase the number of blocks of ice by charging the spell. And this is Follow Bullet. You enchant yourself with Engram Bullets. Whenever you use a tactical skill, you send out seeking bullets of the same element. Finally, the Spellcaster's ultimate skill is called Meteo Inferno. You call down a meteor to strike the target location for massive damage. Next, let's look at the updated Spellcaster video on the new official site. We can first see the Spellcaster using Fire Blast. The next skill appears to be Blizzard. It looks like the visual effects of the spell have been updated quite a bit. Continuing on, this is Engram Bullets. The effects of the seeking bullets have changed. They no longer match the element of the spell being used, so perhaps they are now non-elemental damage? Next up is Lightning. The number of rays of lightning have been increased without needing to charge. And finally, we can see the spellcaster recharging EP with engram charge. Let's also look at what we learned about the spellcaster in the recent developer livestream. The developers start by saying that depending on the skill used, the spellcaster is able to deal large, powerful single hits or aim to raise the party chain with multiple hit spells. Their damage itself is very high and applies a large amount of elemental buildup to enemies, so they are able to aim for elemental bursts. Overall, they have high burst damage, but in between casting spells, they need to stop to refill their EP. Having an ally cover them while they regain their EP is very beneficial and is one of the reasons they are a party-oriented class. Another mechanic the developers introduced here is the long-range class enemy step jump. Opposed to close-range classes who put themselves in position to do an assault attack on top of the enemy, long-range classes distance themselves with enemies through this enemy step jump mechanic. The final class is Heavy Smasher. This is a close to mid-range class that holds the front line using a heavy hammer that's capable of shooting. Their tremendous blows shake the earth and protect their allies from groups of enemies. This class's mechanic is the cartridge system. The Heavy Smasher uses these cartridges to perform its tactical skills. When there are no cartridges left, certain skills cannot be used until cartridges are reloaded. The Heavy Smasher was not in a closed beta, so we are going to jump right into looking at its class video from the official site. First skill here appears to shoot out the weapon's ball and pull enemies back in on its return. Next, we can see the Heavy Smasher doing a powerful leap attack. This is followed up by what appears to be a super armor buff. This next skill appears to be acting as a magnet or vacuum, gathering rocks to shoot out at a foe. And here we can see an area of effect leap attack. It leaves behind slow-moving whirlwinds, which look like they will damage foes. Next, let's look at what the developers had to say in the developer livestream. As we can see here, the Heavy Smasher is able to shoot out the ball part of the hammer. It is not only useful for shooting at enemies, but it can also be shot backwards to fling oneself into the air. Opposed to the Twin Striker, which excels at doing multiple hits and raising the party chain, the Heavy Smasher has slow, powerful blows. In this video, the enemy is a boss, so it is a little hard to tell, but weaker enemies can be knocked back or knocked down to the ground. As I discussed earlier, this class's tactical skills use cartridges to activate. How many cartridges are needed is dependent on the skill. Once cartridges run out, tactical skills can no longer be used, so you need to be on the lookout for a chance to reload. The class also has some mechanics that give extra cartridges when you reload at 0 remaining, or gain certain buffs when reloading. The class itself acts as something of a sub-tank. It has high base HP and is able to put super armor buff on itself. Making use of those allows the Heavy Smasher to withstand enemy attacks. Thus, if your main tank is in trouble, you can step in and take aggro for a moment. The Heavy Smasher is also able to move enemies around with its skills. So if there is an enemy shield user in the way, the Heavy Smasher could knock them away so their team can get to the weaker enemies behind. And that is the end of my overview of Blue Protocol's classes. Which class do you like the best? I am personally leaning towards a Spellcaster or Blast Archer, but I want to give all the classes a try. I can't wait for the network test and game's release. As for future classes, we have seen some of the supporting characters from the story using different weapons than what the current classes use. For example, Tidus is shown wielding 2 swords, Carvine is shown wielding a spear, and another character is shown wielding guns. A spear and a gun class in particular seem likely to come in the future. The reason for this is because if you look closely at the weapon shop in Astraleads, there are already guns and spears on display. What other classes would you like to see in the future? Let me know in the comments. And that brings me to the end of this video. As always, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!